My name's Brad. I'm the Harley Davidson Wizard. We're getting back to the 2016 Street Glide Special here, where we're doing the T-Man 555 cam and the D&D Tuna one. So the power's back on here, so as you can tell, this is where we left off. We have everything removed as far as the valve train. We're doing a little higher quality lifter, obviously the cams, and we have just about everything pulled apart. All left that we have to do is replace the inner cam bearings, and the only special tools that I'm going to be using today is this crankshaft run out indicator. I'm just going to slap that on there and make sure that there isn't like crazy pinion shaft run out, which I can't imagine there's going to be, but we double check it anyways. And then this is a Harley Davidson Screaming Eagle tool. It's a cam bearing installer. Actually, let me start over here. This is also a Screaming Eagle tool, and this is a cam bearing remover. Basically, it's just a collet that goes into the cam bearing. It fits right here. And then it comes with a little rod that you tap through there, and it expands the collet. And then this tool that goes over the top of it, and as you tighten down the nut on the back side, it draws the bearing out of the engine case. And then when we go to put the new cam bearing in, this is, like I was saying, a Screaming Eagle tool. I like using this one because it has a positive stop, so realistically you can't install the bearing too far, where if you have like the normal Harley Davidson tool, it doesn't have this big thick radius on it. So if you aren't paying attention or whatever, you could just run the whole bearing in way too far. So that's why I bought these. Obviously you can tell they're pretty well used, but they've been holding up really well, no problems with that. We already have all of our old parts cleaned up. The bolts are clean. I took them to the wire wheel and then just hosed them off with degreaser, or the multi-purpose solvent that we use. Cam plate's clean. Everything looks good with the oil pump, no problems there. These are the two different types of engine lube that we're going to use today. This Torco, this engine lube comes in the S&S oil pump and cam support plate kit. It's really nice because they give you 2 tubes, I believe, and it goes a long ways. I like this stuff because it's nice and thin. I like using it on the oil pump because I'm going to use a process to inline the gerotor up on the pinion as best as possible. And I feel like the really thick assembly lube from the Screaming Eagle, I feel like maybe it doesn't do as good of a job because it's too thick. But I like using this on areas that are going to be late to getting oil pressure, like push rods and rocker arms and valve stems and things like that. So here's the table laid out. Like we said, all of this stuff's already cleaned up, and then we just left things kind of organized, and we'll clean things back up as we put them back on the motorcycle. But I'm just going to speed up through this a little bit, but these are the 3 tools you'll be seeing me use. This pinion shaft run out is a really good tool. It's 3D printed. It's nice because it does Evolution, Milwaukee 8, and twin cam. So it's fairly inexpensive. You can find these, I believe he sells them on eBay, but Dave makes them. He works over at S&S, but pretty nice tool. I used to have the fueling tool for twin cam, but then Milwaukee 8 came out and I was like, do I really need to buy a whole new aluminum plate? And then I saw that Dave was making this, and I've been using this, and I sold the old fueling one on eBay just because this one does all 3 of them. So let's get back to the bike and get going on it and see where we end up today. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. So where we're at right now is we have the new Screaming Eagle cam bearings pressed in. You want to double check that you can spin them by hand, because if you can't spin them by hand, then chances are they're pressed in too far. But what I do, I guess I should have started off with saying this, is first I oil the bearings while they're in my hand, like freely, like on the hoist, and then I'll oil them with the oil can, spin them around to make sure that there's oil everywhere in them. Then I press them in, and then make sure that you can still spin them. And then I've already used the Screaming Eagle assembly lube, the thick stuff, to lube the lifter bores. And I also like to put it on the O-rings because it helps to hold them in there. And yeah, so you have your oil pump O-ring and then your feed and your return. And then I use the Torco, the red assembly lube. Just put some of that right here on the crankshaft. I've already blown out all of the threads with the multi-purpose cleaner. If you haven't seen that in my other videos, it is this stuff from Worth. I keep a little tip on it so that I can get it into the back of the threads and blow all the oil and crap out. And then use compressed air to blow all the threaded holes out. All of those are clean. That's really important because like ones like this where there's an oil passage, the oil naturally like runs down and fills this passage while you're working, and then if you go and run that bolt in, you can fracture the case. So you want to make sure that all the bolt holes are free and dry and clear, and then the engine case is ready to go back together. Well, the cams parts of it at least. So we have our assembly loops here. The screws, like I was saying, have already been on the wire wheel, cleaned up with a multi-purpose solvent. We're going to be using the blue thread locker. And then when you disassemble your cam plate, there's going to be two of these. There's one that's always 100 thousandths. That's this one. And then there's one that is there's like 5 or 6 different thicknesses. But this one shims out where the actual timing gear is on the camshaft. And then this one is always 100 thousandths. And this one goes on the non-driven camshaft. You'll see it as I put it together. So in your assembly or in your cam service kit, there's going to be this little baggie of snap rings and things. So take those things, just throw them away because you don't need them. And you don't want those little parts getting stuck in your business, like get lost or get stuck to something. And then there's 2 different snap rings. I don't know if you can tell, but this one is perfectly flat and this one has a bit of a wave in it. The flat one is for 2006 and earlier, and then yeah, this wave one is like 2007 and later. So we're going to be using this wave one. It's important when we install this wave, like if you can tell, it's got the wave right in the center of it. So like this end of it is pointing up, this end of it's pointing up. We want it to sit just like that, and then the camshaft to kind of like fit on it just like that. Well, I guess that's just an easier way of looking at it right there. Because what the motor company says is sometimes that if you have it like this where the outsides of it are pointing down, sometimes those can like get snagged on this spacer and then pop the thing off. So I'm sure there's a bazillion YouTube videos as far as putting cams together. This just happens to be what I'm doing today. There isn't much to do, so I'm making a video of it, of the way that I do it. So you want to make sure that when you're putting your wave washer in, oh, there you go. Now you can really get a good look at it. When you're putting your wave washer in, that the wave is, like the center of the wave is pointed down for the least likelihood of the tabs of it getting snagged. Alright, so let's continue on. So we might as well start with putting our cam chain on. It's easy. Let me move the camera. So I do it like this. There you go. Put it on one of the cams with the dot pointing down. Stick your other cam in. And then kind of with your cam being loose in there, you can kind of move it around, and do you see that is now correctly in line? So I'm just going to put them right here. It's a little unusual working in front of the camera like this, but so our timing marks are lined up. Our cam support plate is all nice and clean. Everything's looking good. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but let's see it if I can get the shimmer on this right. This thing only has 2,000 miles on it. It's normal to see a little bit of wear like here, like a little bit of circular wear, but I don't know if you can tell, but there's a couple little boogers in there, like right there, and a pretty good sized booger right there. You see that? That's like casting flash. We might as well peel that off right now so that it doesn't get jammed up in something, because it's going to break off sooner or later. You know, just keep your eyes out for stuff like that. I'm going to do that here in a second. But this is what a normal 2,000 mile oil pump looks like. This one looks really good. There is just hardly any there's a couple little grooves in there, but not much. And then this is what the gerotors look like. So just in case you wanted to know what a 2,000 mile twin cam oil pump looked like, this is it. The faces are looking good. Obviously you want to keep these things together. Just a couple little marks in there, but nothing too bad. So I'm gonna go clean this little casting flash up along with that. You don't want to get all crazy, you know, you don't need to get in there with like a die grinder or anything. I'm just gonna use a little razor blade and just like chip that thing out, and then clean it, and we'll be right back. Alright, we got that casting flash cleaned up. It took all of about a half a second. I don't know if you can tell, but it looks a little bit nicer here. And I had a little bit of like a jaggedy flashy deal all the way up there. But not that like, even if that would have peeled off of there, and then it would have just gotten stuck in the oil filter. Like, it was too small and flimsy to really even matter. But hey, you know, you got eyes for a reason. When you're doing stuff, you know, you might as well keep an eye out for things that you can fix up easily, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lube up the surface of this, and then, well, I guess I might as well do it while it's right here. And again, this is this Torco. I don't know if that's how you say it, but Torco MPZ. It's great stuff. The cams are going to ride on the back of here too, so we might as well put a little lube on there. This is just the assembly lubricant I prefer. You know, use whatever you want, but I put it anywhere that the metal is going to be touching other metal until oil pressure gets there. And I feel like since this stuff is so thin that like once oil pressure does build up and oil gets to that surface, I feel like it's no big deal for it to get out of the way and let the oil into where it's supposed to be. Where with the Screaming Eagle stuff, I've seen like it's weird stuff. Like if you shoot, like when I'm using my spray can or my oil squirter, you can feel like the oil kind of like breaks down the assembly lube, which is, so it doesn't always stay like super ridiculously tacky, but this is just the way I do it. Lube all this business up. There are other special Harley Davidson tools that I'm not using it. Like there's special little things to hold this, and we've done this a million times. We don't need any of that business. So get one in the bore, and then his buddy in the bore. Walk her in there, make sure that your timing marks are still timed up. So your 100,000th shim always goes on the front camshaft. Always, always, always. And then like we were talking about with the wave retaining washer, you don't want to, you don't want to like spread this thing out super huge. You just want to spread it out enough until it slides over. And then push it down. And because it's a wave washer, you'll have to push it down for it to snap into place. Just like that. Just like that. Just like that. I don't know if you could hear that, but that was 3 snaps, and that's normal. Well, that's the way that it normally looks, is what I'm saying. And then I just go around and I push down with the snap ring plier all the way around. Make sure that your timing marks are still good, which they are. So then at this point, we're going to get the tensioner installed on the back. I'm going to grab that. Be back in a second. We got the Loctite on there. You want to make sure if your tensioner, well, even if it didn't pop apart, I was going to say like when you pulled it apart, if the tensioner popped out of it, which it typically will, because there's a spring in there, you want to make sure that you have the spring back in the right spot. Now, obviously, if you have a higher mileage bike, you might as well replace the thing. Like, they don't wear out like the earlier style twin cam ones, but if you have 60,000 miles on your bike, like, I think they're $30 each or something. You might as well just do it. They're gonna be showing some wear. So run the screws in, just like that. Be very careful with things. I didn't mention this earlier, but a lot of these tools, like the Allen bits and the snap ring pliers, you use them all over the vehicle if you're doing it yourself. So you want to be conscious that you clean the tool up before you go sticking it in engine parts, so you don't introduce any type of dirt and debris into the engine. Alright, so these I'm doing 120 inch-pounds, just like that. Alright, and with the cams all the way up, they should be able to be free and spin. Just so you don't have anything bound up. Everything's looking good. We already lubed up the back of the oil pump, where the oil pump fits in there. So that is ready to go in the vehicle. We're going to get our oil pump together. We already have the O-ring inside the motorcycle. This is the way I do this. Shoot some lube in it. I don't know why, but I like to get the lube back in the corners. I guess it's probably because it's hard to get your finger in that corner. Lube all of this up. Just like that. I'm going to flip this gerotor set over here, so all my parts will kind of just fall in like that. Then I pull it out a little bit. Actually, I normally pull it out all the way. Shoot some lube on each one. Make sure you get every little surface coated. Toss it back in there. Spin it around like that. Any that squeezes out. Slide it in. And then little thrust surfaces on these metal plates. likewise there. Move that bad boy up. Get her inside. Spin it. And then drop it right in the oil pump. Alright, so now we're ready to walk over to the bike, put the oil pump in, put the cam plate in. I'll show you how I line this up, and then let's get going. Alright, we're back at the motorcycle. This is the way I like to do it. Like we were talking about earlier, the O-rings are already in. I use the Screaming Eagle assembly lube on there. New bearings. Everything has assembly lube on it, and the pump is already assembled. I like to put it in very lightly, and then with my other hand I'm going to spin the rear wheel over, and it's in 6th gear still, so it's going to turn the crankshaft, and then it will line up the rotors by itself. You just want to be patient with it, and then once we get to this point, it just needs to be pushed in the O-ring, just like that. And then everything's ready for the cam plate to go in. And we already have the cams and the tensioner on it, so let's do that. I forgot to mention to obviously lube up your camshafts, your cam lobes. So I'm going to smear that around off camera. Alright, so now we're back with our cam lobes all lubed up. And then you're just going to line up the back of the camshafts with the inner cam bearing. So just going to pop together, and then it should basically just slide right in. Obviously, you'll want to, these are dropping camshafts, so we don't really need to, but you'll want to make sure that you have clearance on the bottom of the lifter bores, that your cam lobes aren't hitting them, but like I said, we don't have to worry about that with this type of setup. So we're going to get blue Loctite on our screws, and we're going to start putting them in the perimeter, and then I put them loosely into the oil pump just to make sure nothing is cocked around all funny. So let's get those screws started. So we've gone around and we've torqued all of the perimeter screws. I do it, well, so behind this screw and then behind this screw, there's a dowel pin. And then that means that there aren't as many threads on this screw as there are this screw. And I've seen where people have pulled the threads out of these, and that makes it a real friggin' bummer when you gotta pull the dowel pin out and fix the threads. So when I'm torquing these down, I do these. I believe the torque spec is like 90 to 120 inch-pounds, but I do these at 90, and then all the other full threads at 120. That's just what I do. And it prevents the situation of pulling the threads out, because there's just a few threads that these dowel pin bolts hold in. But as of right now, our oil pump screws are, I drew in the oil pump, like I kind of seated the screws. Like I'll do it again. I just lightly seat the screws, just like that. And then I pop them back just enough to break the screws loose. The service manual will tell you, but it also has indicated right on the face of the cam plate, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the rear tire to spin the transmission and the primary and ultimately the crankshaft to rotate the crankshaft. So that the idea here is that there's going to be pinion shaft run out, and we want to make sure that we don't bind the pump up, because there is a little bit of movement where the pump housing can move back and forth just a little bit. So we want to use those gerotors to help us line up the actual pump itself. So what I do is put my tool in, and then I turn. You'll see the crankshaft spinning. That's what we're doing. And while the crankshaft is spinning, I'm going to tighten the screw up and kind of seat the pump in that location. Just like that. Alright, everything's lightly seated. I'm going to do the exact same thing while using a torque wrench. And I do this in a couple different torque steps. Like first is just a little baby torque at 50 inch-pounds. Then I'm going to jump up to 90 inch-pounds. I'm using a rag on my hand on the rear tire so it doesn't get all dirty and messy. There you go. Just like that. And then I do a final one at 120. 120 inch-pounds, that is. Perfect. So we've done everything that we can to line the pump up correctly. Our run out was within spec when I checked it. We set both of these screws at 90 inch-pounds to keep those threads good. Everything's got assembly lube on it. Snap ring is in fully, so everything is ready to start putting the timing chain on. So I just know from doing this a million times that when you put the timing chain on, your dots are going to be directly across from each other, and this flat is usually on like a center line with the camshaft, so it's already kind of lined up for the gears to go on. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to put the cam gears back on without the cam chain so that we can measure it and make sure that the cam drive gears, that these two are going to be in line. We don't want them offset or something crazy, and that's why the shims are different thicknesses for back here, is so that we can change the offset of the cam drive. But you got to put a shim behind it in the first place. I'm being a dodo. Alright, so here's the stock shim, and then the cam drive gear. And just from doing this so many times, like right off the get-go, I can get a pretty good, like we're going to measure it, but that's feeling like we're pretty much there. Like you can get a pretty good idea just by feeling it. I'm going to go up one shim. It looks like I'm going to have to measure it, but it looks like it says 130. So I'm going to grab a 140, toss it on there, and we'll be. So with my hunch, we're going to start with a 140. I only use brand new ones, like I don't want to mess around and use janky old ones. But we got that on there, and then we'll put our drive gear on there, and then I forgot to mention this earlier, but I'm going to be using this camshaft gear locking tool. It just slides in there, just like that. And these are the old bolts. You keep the old bolts, spin them in here, and then I'm going to torque them down, and we're going to use the old bolts to measure. And then we have new bolts that have a new clean lock patch on it and everything, and it tells you to only use them once, so that's the whole deal. That's why you hold on to the old ones and use it. So I'm going to torque them down. All right. And then you just gotta bump the tire back. Just like that. And then now we're gonna measure it. It feels like we probably could have. No, it feels pretty good. Let's double check. So you use a straight edge, whatever you got, and then a 10 thousandths feeler gauge, like that. You put it across the face, and if your crank gear is too far out, then you will see a gap against the face of the cam gear. And likewise, like if your cam gear is too far out, then you hold it up there, and then you'll feel it up against the face of the crank gear. But it looks like it's right within spec. Like, put it up there. The cam gear is a little bit behind the crank gear, but you can't fit a 10 thousandths in there, so she's good. So then I'm going to pop these screws off, put the timing chain on, and then torque it down with the new screws. I'll just speed up through that. We're going to do the same thing as far as making sure that the timing dots are lined up. Let's get going on that. So we're almost done in the camshaft, really. We just got to put this tensioner here back on. I find it easiest to start the top screw. It's weird because I'm doing this in the opposite hands I normally would. But I get it started, almost seat it. And then get your bottom screw and just push it in. Get your bottom screw in. Then you torque this guy down to 90 inch-pounds. All right. Perfect. So everything's basically buttoned up in here. I just want to say that you do want to be careful about the snap ring. I personally, knock on wood, I haven't ever had one pop off. But I did have a bike come in where a guy had paid like his son or a friend. It was like a son of a friend to put a set of cams in a bike, and that snap ring fell off. The bike came in to me for sumping problems, and that thing was broken in like 14 different pieces. And well, it was broken in half, and then the one half was jammed up in the oil pump. As far as the scavenge, it was jammed up in there, and then the other half had like made it through the oil pump and just tore the scavenge pump right up. So hardened steel like that snap ring is definitely bad news when it falls apart and gets stuck in things. So you want to make sure that you have that thing seated well, like we were talking about. But all our timing dots are lined up, so that's pretty easy. We've already blown out all the threads. The new cam service gasket kit comes with a new cam cover gasket. So I'm going to grab that, put that on here, and then tighten down the cam cover. I forgot to mention this, but I should have mentioned it earlier. You want to keep your screws separated. So the inner screws that hold the cam support plate in and the oil pump and all of that are shorter than the actual cam cover screws. The cam cover screws are this long, and the lifter block and the cam support plate and the oil pump screws are this long. So these screws up here are short, along with all the screws that go inside the engine are short. So if you're doing this, you want to make sure that you leave the screws that are outside the engine outside, and the clean screws inside the engine inside the engine. So, and the long screws are for the cam cover. Just in case you happen to toss all your parts together, a little tip. So now that we have the cam cover and everything perfectly set in there, we're going to move our attention up to the lifters now. Like I said earlier, I already, when I had my rubber gloves on, I put Screaming Eagle Assembly Lube on my finger and just put Screaming Eagle Assembly Lube in the lifter bores. So earlier you probably saw how I was using this tool and there were a lot of bubbles in it. I had pumped up the lifters, put them in this tool. It's from Jim's, to pump up the lifters and then pull any type of excess air out of them. So they're all pumped up and lubed up and everything. It doesn't matter which way the little fill holes are pointing. I like to keep them all in the same direction. I like to have them pointing towards the engine for no particular reason. I just feel like that's kind of professional, is to have them all pointing in the same direction. So that's the way I do it. And I try to do it without making a mess. But it's tough around a camera. Slide them in there. It's a tight fit because of the Screaming Eagle Assembly Lube, but you're better off with a tight fit than a dry fit. So I'll clean all this oily mess that I'm making up later after we get everything all assembled. Alright, the lifters are in. So all of the lifters are in. I like to make sure where the gasket sits is free of oil. So that's where I'm just using this lint-free towel with a little bit of cleaner on it. And then we don't want to forget the anti-rotation pins. So they will just fit in that little groove. Once you have the lifters lined up, obviously. So those are in. And then the new lifter gaskets. Making a mess. The new lifter gaskets go in like so. Just like that. So the little tabs are sitting on top of the anti-rotation pin. And then like that. And then the lifter blocks aren't the same. There's one for the front and one for the rear. I don't know if you can mess them up, but, or flip them around. Probably not. Just saying that in case you didn't know. There's a front one and a rear one. There we go. Now we're just going to put the screws in and torque it down to 90 inch-pounds. So everything is looking pretty good. we already have, like we were talking about, all the cam stuffs together. I just put new O-rings in the pushrod tubes. Those O-rings come in the cam cover gasket kit, so we don't need any additional components. The only other thing we really have to do from here down is to replace the exhaust gaskets. The D&D pipe comes with its own special exhaust gaskets. I'll probably show you those once we go to put the pipe on. This cam uses the stock push rods. That's why we didn't cut the push rods out and use adjustables. That's why we took everything apart. As far as, so the only things that we have to do now is to blow the oil out of the bolt holes inside the rocker boxes, put the push rods and the rocker arms back on, and the upper rocker box covers. I'll put a link in the description down below of a video that goes more into detail as far as how to rotate the engine over, get the cam on its base circle, clean everything up, and putting the rocker box assembly back together, just to hopefully keep this video a little bit shorter. So I'm going to do that. I'll probably do a time lapse of that, but if you would like more information on how to do this the best that you can, or properly, or whatever, check that description out. It's a video I made a few days ago. We're finally ready to get the D&D pipe out of this box. I'm just going to tell you right off the get-go that this is not the recommended way to open this box, but it's heavy, so this is the way I'm going to do it. So this is the new exhaust system mount. It fits right under the transmission. There's already one there from the factory, so we're just going to unbolt that, bolt this thing up there. Comes with a couple standoffs. These will be used in the back by the rear fender. Carriage bolt, things of that nature. So here's what I was talking about. The exhaust gaskets are different. It's something to pay attention to. This is a stock exhaust gasket. You can see it. I don't know if you can tell, but it has a little bit of a cone shape to it. Like it's thick on this end, thinner on this end. That's because the stock head pipe has a matching flare that fits in there. And then the tighter that you draw it in, the tighter the fit is around here. Where the D&D exhaust system comes with these other exhaust gaskets. You can see they're a little bit narrower, but they're fatter. And the exhaust flange on this head pipe has a matching flat, like blunt edge that fits up into this, and that makes it so when you draw on the pipe, it fits up against this fatter edge and it seals, and it doesn't have a tendency to crush, and you get better exhaust flow that way. In my experience, D&D has two exhaust gaskets. They have this metal fiber kind of deal with their normal Fat Cat, and then they have a Borzilla a Borzilla style exhaust gasket where it's metal, and it's a completely different deal. So if you're ever replacing these, you want to make sure that you get the right ones. But just a little view of what we got. So I like to get the pipe to this kind of stage where the back of it is free, but it still has the bubble wrap protection on the front. Let me bring it in a little bit closer, geez. And then I like to pull out the O2 sensor bungs. D&D is the better of the places where they put a little bit of anti-seize on it. But no matter whose pipe it is, I always take a tap and run it through there and clean the threads up. It's a special size tap. It's not just like something that you're going to find in your tap kit. It's 18 millimeter by 1.5. but I like to just go through the threads and make sure that there isn't any type of powder coating or any type of junk in there that's going to make it hard to put an O2 sensor in it while it's on the motorcycle. So a couple of reasons why I really like the D&D pipe. So as you can tell, the heat shields already come on it, already come with the heat shield clamps and everything all tightened down. It already comes with the flanges on it, and the header pipes have foresight, and that's where the exhaust nut's going to be. So you can see there's a lot of good planning there. The way that the exhaust is made so that this fits up against the exhaust gasket is like a perfect fit and finish. So you can see that there's just a lot of time spent as far as design and quality that's built into it, and D&D's always been like that. So I'm going to get the exhaust gaskets in the cylinder heads, and let's put the pipe on. Here we are, we're all finished up with the 2016 Street Glide Special. We got the T-Main cam in it. We got the D&D fat cap and the variable pressure clutch. So this is the first time we're starting it up. We'll get it down to the warehouse.